Okay, right off the top, the White House. Wrapping up moments ago, there at the White House, President Trump met face-to-face with the newest leader of Poland. Now, this is notable because President Trump endorsed the leader for the top spot in his country. This marks his first visit overseas since taking office. Now, before that departure, the two leaders participated in this. You saw it, a bilateral meeting. One of the major topics during that, the years-long war going on between Poland's neighbors. We're talking, of course, about Russia and Ukraine. Now, remember, the president is still pushing for both Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to come to the table and create peace. Despite a big summit in Alaska where Vladimir Putin got a red carpet arrival, that has yet to happen. But listen to what President Trump had to say when he was asked about that.
You gave Vladimir Putin a 2-week deadline to agree to talks with Volodymyr Zelensky. That deadline is now nearly approached. Can you give us any indication of when you will make it?
Well, I'm having a conversation with him very shortly, and I'll know pretty much what we're going to be doing. We've taken very strong action, as you know, and in other ways we've taken very strong action. But I'll be speaking to him over the next few days, and we're going to see.
With whom, sir?
I'm going to know exactly what's happening.
Mr.
But I'm not happy with all the people. You got 7,819 people killed last week. Russian soldiers and Ukraine soldiers, right? Not American soldiers, not soldiers from Poland, but they're human beings, they're souls. They have parents, they wave goodbye to their parents, and their parents never see them again. That's the end of them. Over a stupid war, and I want to see it stopped.
So let's go live outside the White House to CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro. So, Aaron, you heard the president there. He says he's not happy where things stand right now. What are the chances that we finally see both Russia's Putin and Ukraine's Zelensky come to the table?
Hey, Reed, good to be with you. If you heard in that clip, there was a moment where President Trump mentioned he's going to be speaking to him at some point in the coming days. You heard a reporter ask who he's talking about there. We're getting some clarification, at least from the White House just now. A White House official tells us that President Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky will speak tomorrow. As far as where things stand for a bilateral meeting, which President Trump has pushed for, it does seem like that is unlikely. President Putin of Russia said that he will do that meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky as long as that is in Moscow. The Ukrainian foreign minister called that, quote, unacceptable, and criticized Putin for those comments given the many other neutral locations that were offered. Now, President Trump in recent days has acknowledged that a bilateral meeting could be unlikely, but is still pushing for a trilateral meeting to happen between the U.S., Ukraine, and Russia. Take a listen to President Trump speak more about Russia and his relationship with President Putin.
I have no message to President Putin. He knows where I stand, and he'll make a decision one way or the other. Whatever his decision is, we'll either be happy about it or unhappy. And if we're unhappy about it, you'll see things happen.
Sir, Venezuela.
Now, it's been clear from the president's comments and just his comments in recent weeks that President Trump is frustrated with the continued Russian strikes on Ukraine. But it remains to be seen what other consequences the U.S. can apply that he's talking about there, given that we have many economic sanctions on Russia as well as secondary sanctions on countries that do business with Russia, such as India.
Well, and Russia-Ukraine wasn't the only big topic that came out of that news conference. What did the president have to say about his new push to crack down on crime across the country?
Yeah, he expanded the map a little bit. He said that he could potentially be sending the National Guard into New Orleans, saying that the governor there, Republican, Governor Landry, said that he wants the administration and the White House to send National Guard to help curb crime in New Orleans. Take a listen to President Trump talk about that in the Oval Office.
Washington, D.C. is a totally safe city. You're not reporting any crime because there is none. They said crime is down 87%, and I said, no, it's not. It's down 100%. We have a great thing going. I could do that with Chicago. We could do that with New York. We could do it with Los Angeles. So we're making a determination now. Do we go to Chicago, or do we go to a place like New Orleans, where we have a great governor, Jeff Landry, who wants us to come in and straighten out a very nice section of this country that's become quite tough, quite bad. So we're going to be going to maybe Louisiana, and you have
Now, it's a notable contrast he's making there with Chicago, saying that the governor of Louisiana is inviting the administration in, compared to Illinois, where we've seen that governor, J.B. Pritzker, say that they will file legal lawsuits should the National Guard be sent to Chicago. It's also a slightly different tone than what we heard from President Trump even yesterday, where he seemed to suggest it's a matter of when, not if, they send the National Guard into Chicago. But you've also seen Governor Pritzker of Illinois criticize the White House and President Trump for not focusing on crime in red states. If the National Guard is sent into New Orleans and Louisiana, this could be the administration's answer to that argument.
Aaron Navarro, CBS News White House reporter, great to spend the day with you. I appreciate it.